Guys, welcome back to my channel, and for today's video we are live at Jurong Lake Gardens. So over here you can see this is the beautiful view of Jurong Lake Gardens, and then later on you can see these condos, right? This is also known as Lake Grande. I'll be touching on those as well for the CMA lah. Yeah, so stay tuned for that part. Okay, so right now Lucerne Grand is slated to be launching mid-September, and the main question here is not whether Lucerne Grand is a good project or not, but at what price is it actually still a good buy? Overview of today's video, I'm going to be talking about what is left in the new launch market for a similar bedroom type. Second part will be Lakeside's previous property cycle. Third part will be what's a safe entry price for the Lakeside area. Fourth one is a OCR replacement cost, right, if we move into 2027 next time. And last but not least, the different bedroom types between 2-bedders all the way to 4-bedders, the CMA comparison for Lakeside area. Okay, so before I dive deeper into the analysis, you can see, right, CDL, they already have prepared some artist impression for us, and you can see over here the vision is kind of simple, but it's blending into the Lakeside area because you can see the choice of colors and the facade is quite similar to some of the condos in Lakeside, like Lake Grande, Lakefront, all this. So it's not too far off, and the vision, you can see they have the clubhouse that is facing the swimming pool directly. So overall, I think it's going to be a decent project in Lakeside. Out of this entire 3-bedroom list, I won't touch on all the projects because I want to compare those remaining ones that is kind of close to what we see at Lucerne Grand. For example, Lucerne Grand is still near MRT. That one will effectively take out like Canberra Crescent, Alta, Nawa residences, because in the end they are not walking distance towards the MRT. And of course, for Lucerne Grand, you are still going to be getting the 1 km towards Suqing Primary School and Rulang Primary School. So definitely these are the factors that you kind of need to compare, which is more apple to apple comparison. So now I want to talk about what are the remaining units in the new launch market for the 3 bedrooms first. Okay, then you can see based on this list we have a couple, and I want to talk about, let's say, Lentoria. Okay, so you see Lentoria, right? The number of units available, still we only have 4 units for the 3-bedders, 2.2 million range, below 2.3. PSF is 2004. But we all know for Lentoria, the usual story still holds. It's kind of the least desirable plot in Lentor area, and then when you compare to the other plots, I think it's still lacking, although it has the school component, but it's going to be facing a lot of intense competition over there. Then for the other plots that is near MRT, we have Trump Park. So Trump Park, the cheapest 3-bedder, also at 3.2 million already, 2003 PSF range. Vela Bay, so this one is harmonized already, 2.3 million for the 3-bedroom compact, and cheapest PSF is at 2591. And last but not least, another near MRT one we have is Jayden. So Jayden only have 1 unit for the 3-bedroom left at 3.11 million, and the PSF is at 2006 range. And when we look at this entire list, I can safely say that Trump Park most likely is the closest one already because it's still near MRT, OCR, and it also has 1 km on the school. So you can see, right, based on Trump Park, since I already said it's kind of like the closest comparison, the cheapest 3-bedder there is already at 3.3 million. So to be honest, if you want something in the new launch market and then it has near MRT and the school, right, there's really not much cheaper options really other than Trump Park. Right now, I want to go back in time, right, to take a look when Lake Grande was first launched, and that is almost 10 years ago already. Back then when Lake Grande first launched in 2016, the other comparable that we had was actually Caspian, and Caspian at that time still be between 2012 to 2013 timeline. Based on that, right, Lake Grande was expected to TOP around 2020. It was about an 8-year gap. So when you compare to what we see at Lucerne Grand is expected to TOP in 2030. So the gap here will be about 10 years old from Lake Grande lah. So I think this is quite an interesting case study because on the other hand, you have an 8-year gap, and then the most recent one, Lake Grande versus Lucerne Grand, this is a 10-year gap. So from this, I'm quite sure we'll be able to see at least some similarity between these 3 lakeside condos. So this is the map of the entire lakeside area, and then you can see for Lucerne Grand, definitely we're going to be much closer towards Lakeside MRT, followed by Caspian, which TOP around 2012, and then last but not least, we have Lake Grande, which TOP around 2020. So this one is going to be slightly further away because you still need to cross the T junction to reach Lakeside MRT station. Here you can see this is a newspaper article talking about Lake Grande launch day. 61% of Lake Grande was actually snapped up during its launch, and this was back in 2016 lah. So right now, before we dive deeper into the numbers, I want to compare the layouts for Lake Grande versus Caspian first, because at that point of time when Lake Grande was launched, there's going to be just this main comparison with Lakeview and all the other lakeside properties lah. But I'm just using Caspian because the age is kind of the most similar versus Lucerne Grand and Lake Grande. Okay, so right now let's take a closer look right at this Caspian 1141 square feet 3-bedroom first. You can see actually throughout this whole unit, because it's that time the era one, there has bay windows all around. So definitely it's not as efficient in terms of the new layouts that you see nowadays. And when you compare this entire layout, right, actually for 1141, this is a very good size. And in the end, why the internal space looks so big, you can see the living room is a landscape layout. It's because they don't have balcony. So this one really depends on individual, whether you like the new one or you don't like the old one. For me, right, I still prefer units without balcony. I know it's quite rare lah, yeah, because the developer can sell the balcony like kind of same price but still charging the same PSF. In the end, overall, I still think this is a very decent 3-bedroom layout, very spacious living. And nowadays, if you see the new launches, you want to get this kind of 3-bedroom landscape layout, the premium is going to be quite high already. Now you can see for the 3-bedroom at Lake Grande, 980 square feet. The main thing I want to zoom in is actually on the balcony. So you can see the balcony, right, is combining between the living room area and also the bedroom 3. Looking at this, you already can tell like actually more of the space is allocated towards the outdoor one, which is balcony lah. And on top of that, right, the kitchen is a lot smaller as compared to the Caspian one because you don't really have the yard, but you got the flexi room which can be a storeroom combined with the WC, which is right opposite bedroom 3. Some people might not like this particular configuration, but I think in the end, I still feel the Caspian layout is a lot better. I think in the end for Lake Grande, for a below 1000 square feet layout type, it's going to be quite efficient already. But if you look at Caspian, although it is 1001, I think the lack of balcony did make up for some of the bay window inefficiencies lah. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comment section. For this, I will still go with Lake Grande because at least the bedrooms, I think you can utilize the space more properly. The bay window, right, I think it's a bit awkward lah. So the partial reason why I think the developers choose not to have balcony for Caspian is because it is facing the MRT directly. Of course, there's the stacks that's non-MRT facing, but overall, it's still going to be quite near towards MRT. And I think having MRT does build up a lot more dust, and if you open it up frequently, right, you're going to be hearing the MRT quite a lot. So I think the developer just decided to do away from the balcony and just have it all internal space instead. Whereas for Lake Grande, because you are going to be facing towards the drone lake gardens, so I think the developers, if they don't do up properly the balcony, the view is going to be wasted essentially if they do everything indoors. Let's take a look at the price trend, right, between these two condos. So you can see back in 2016, Lake Grande was actually launching about 1002-1003 PSF range, whereas Caspian, we are looking at about 1001 PSF range. At that point of time, the price gap was about 27%. Now when we fast forward 4 years later, this is when Lake Grande actually TOP. You can see Q3 2020, the PSF actually shot up to about 1005, almost 1006 PSF range. Whereas for Caspian, we are already hitting about 1001 PSF range. Of course, Lake Grande actually moved a lot faster than Caspian, and this actually resulted in a 34% gap. When we fast forward to this year, this quarter, right, you can see for Lake Grande, we already have PSF hitting about 1009 already. And for Caspian, we already hit about 1005 PSF range, some units even hitting 1006. But the main thing here is that I want to say the price premium or the price gap still maintain itself at about 27%. So you can see from 2016 all the way to today, right, 10 years later, the PSF gap or the PSF premium still remain about 27%. So of course, maybe on the TOP stage for Lake Grande, people might be more willing to pay a little bit more premium because maybe it's the newest block there, newest project there. But in the end, it still normalizes to about this 20+%, almost 30% gap in the resale market. And using this formula, right, we kind of want to estimate like what we should expect for Lucerne Grand versus Lake Grande as well. I did up a simple timeline for you guys on what is actually happening in Lakeside. So you can see, first up we have is Caspian. This is back in 2012. So the PSF transacted is about 1005, almost 1006 already. And then we add in the harmonization, which is 5%, right? It works out to be about 1006 PSF plus, almost 1007. Next one we have is Lake Grande. So this one TOP in 2020. And at that point of time, PSF was about 1942. So I also adjusted the PSF, right? It works out to be 2039 after harmonization. And you can see for a 8-year gap, it's about 23% premium. So this one is a bit lower than what what we already have worked with just now when we see the chart of 27%, because I'm using more conservative numbers lah. And then now we add Lucerne Grand to the mix, so this one we should be expecting it to TOP around 2030, assuming 27% gap, right, and with a 10-year horizon. This actually works out to be 2593 PSF, so this is almost 2006 PSF. Using Lake Grande's numbers, right, I do think based on the age gap is quite reasonable. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comment section. I don't think it's a huge stretch lah, especially if you compare to what people were paying for Lake Grande versus Caspian back then. Based on this quick comparison, definitely 2006 seems like a reasonable price gap, but I still want a little bit of a margin of safety lah. The calculations moving forward, right, I'm just using 2005 for all the CMA later on, then you can kind of see like how this works out, and this is already kind of based on a more conservative value. So right now, I want to talk about the upcoming OCR Land Bids, and we should be expecting these launches to happen in 2027. The first one we have is Lentor Central. So Lentor Central, if you guys already have watched my previous video, the land bid is at around 1002 PSF range, and the break even is about 2003. So once we add in a 20% profit margin, we should be expecting about 2008 PSF for launch in Lentor. And the second one will be Bedok Rise. So Bedok Rise is about 1003 PSF range also for the land. Break even is about 2004, and then this works out to be 2009 PSF after we add in a 20% profit margin. So next up we have is the two trunk growth plots. So those are also in the 1003 PSF range, and we actually work out the estimated break even about 2002 2003 PSF range. And of course, after we add in the 20% profit margin, we should be looking at about 2007 PSF, almost 2008 already. We see all these numbers that is coming up for next year's OCR launches. Definitely, I do think Lucerne Grand, even if they launch at 2005, 2006 PSF range, the rest is going to be more expensive lah. Let's put it this way. I think it's just more of what you can buy if you are still just looking at the new launches, because next year, the new launches definitely going to be more expensive than what we are seeing this year. The key takeaway here is that I'm not saying all these projects will sell off on day one, but I'm just saying that like the replacement cost for OCR new launches is definitely going up over the years. So you can see, even you compare last year OCR and RCR prices, right, is drastically different, and then you move forward one more year, it's going to be another level higher. Now, before we kind of say like this is like a game of musical chair, because I think developers do keep bidding higher for the land, and then I think a lot of agents also kind of use this to talk about like the higher break even and justifying like the next new launch being more expensive, right? I agree that we actually need to be more careful here. Just because the developer pay high for the land, it doesn't mean that the market is going to be automatically accepting whatever price they sell. So to be honest, if you follow my framework, right, the future land cost is only one component of the framework, and in the end, developers also can overpay for land. For some of the launches, if they actually launch at 2008, 2009 PSF, they actually could have difficulty selling those units as well. That's why my analysis, I also compare like historically what has been accepted in Lakeside area lah. That's why I talk about Caspian versus Lake Grande, then Lake Grande versus Lucerne Grand. I think that one is more localized. I think it makes more sense rather than just plucking other OCR project numbers, right, then to compare to Lakeside, because I think different area will perform differently. Like for example, I know there's some projects in the RCR selling same price as OCR projects, but why is there still a higher demand for the certain OCR projects even at a higher PSF? Every district, every area, right, has their own characteristics. Okay, so now I want to talk about the CMA in the Lakeside area. Okay, first up is the 2 bedrooms. Okay, so for the CMA at Lucerne Grand 2 bedders, I'll be using a benchmark of 2005 PSF, because in the end, I think anything higher, it kind of diminishes the margin of safety lah. When you look at the 2-bedroom transactions in the market today, right, you can see first one we have is the resale project, which is also Lake Grande. So the distance towards the MRT is about 400 meters away, and the sizes transacted is about 600 plus square feet for Lake Grande. And the recent transaction, the range is about 1008 PSF all the way to 2000 PSF, already done in the resale market. And the quantum range is about 1.18 million all the way to 1.25 million. Then now moving on to the newer projects. So this one is also Lake Garden residences lah. So this one, distance to MRT of course is further away at about 1.6 kilometers, and the size is 678 square feet for the reference lah, for the 2 bedders. And the PSF done, this is already averaging about 2350 PSF. Quantum is at 1.59 all the way to 1.6 million and followed by Sora. So Sora is even further away from the MRT, 732 square feet, 2004 PSF on average, and the quantum transacted is about 1.67 for the lower floors all the way to 1.8 1.89 million already. So now, assuming Lucerne Grand, distance to MRT is about 350 meters. So this is the closest comparison to Lake Grande. And assuming this is a 635 square feet harmonized layout, I times 2005 PSF because I think this is a reasonable PSF to estimate. This actually works out to be about 1.59 million. To be honest, when you compare this to Lake Grande, definitely on the lower range is going to be quite a big gap because we see about a 400k gap. But if you compare to the higher range units, actually 300k gap for almost a 10-year-old unit, I think is quite reasonable because if you factor in about 100k in renovations, then you should be working out quite close to this number already. Actually, if you compare to Lake Gardens and even Sora, right, 1.59 million at Lucerne Grand is actually the lower range versus these two projects already. And these two projects are so far from the MRT and also don't have 1 km towards Rulang or Suqing. Definitely, I think based on these two new launch projects, right, you see for Sora, you even have up to 1.89 million for the 2 bidders transacted. So this gives you a very good buffer of about 300k. When you go and compare the PSF also, right, assuming we adjust for the harmonization, you can see for Lake Grande, when it transacted about 1009 PSF, right, you plus 5%, right, you can see the PSF is at 2059 versus Lucerne Grand's 2005 PSF is about a 20% PSF gap. Whereas if you compare to Lake Garden Residences at 2350 after harmonization is at 2004 range, it's actually about 1.3% gap only. Whereas for Sora, you average about 2004, then you plus 5%, it's going to be looking at 2005 PSF. And then if we compare to Lucerne Grand's 2005 PSF, it's actually also about 1% gap. So the main key takeaway over here is that you compare Lucerne Grand versus the two new launches, which is Sora and Lake Garden, right? Actually, the PSF gap is quite reasonable because they're almost the same after you adjust for harmonization. For the 21% price gap, Lucerne Grand versus Lake Grande, right, I still think it's quite reasonable and within expectations of what we see historically. So now moving on to the 3-bedroom CMA for Lucerne Grand, right, you can see for Lake Grande, the size for the 3 bidders is between 904 to 980 square feet. The PSF transacted recently is about 1009 PSF, and the quantum we are looking at is about 1.74 million all the way to 1.9 million done. Now for Lake Garden Residences, the recent one is gonna be the bigger 3 bidders, but bear with me, okay? So it's about 1002 to 1003 square feet. Average PSF transacted is about 2002. So the quantum is between 2.69 million to 3 million. This one, right, definitely the quantum is a bit higher because of the size lah. But the most recent transactions, you only have this because for Lake Gardens, the smaller 3 bidders, they were sold much earlier into the project launch. So now moving on to Sora, you can see for Sora is between the 900 plus all the way to 1001, and the average PSF here is also still done in the 2002 range, and this actually works out to be about 2.14 million all the way to 2.88 million. You can see even on the lower range for the smaller units, you already have done about 2.14 million already. And if you compare to Lucerne Grand, assuming harmonized 926 square feet, right, at 2005 PSF, this actually works out to be 2.32 million already. So when you compare this 2.32 million versus what is done at Sora, I think it's still very reasonable considering Lucerne Grand's attribute is much better than Sora. Now doing the same thing, I'll just look at the PSF, right? You can see for Lake Grande, after adjustment, right, is at 2032 PSF, and then it's about 23% gap versus Lucerne Grand at 2005 PSF. Whereas for Lake Garden Residences, after the harmonization adjustment, 2003 PSF range, we're looking at about 5% gap. Whereas for Sora, also after the 5% harmonization, looking at 2003, almost 2004, and this actually works out to be also a 4% plus gap. Based on this more conservative estimate of 2005 PSF, right, you already can see that actually Lucerne Grand is still more expensive in terms of PSF versus Sora and Lake Garden Residences, but I still think this is still a reasonable PSF premium over these two launches. And based on the historical gap just now, like I mentioned, the 23%, right, is still well within what we see at Caspian versus Lake Grande. Okay, last but not least, I want to talk about the 4 bidders. Using all the same metrics, just the size that's different, right? You can see for Lake Grande's 4 bidder, this is a 1152 square feet and the average PSF transactor is at 2047. Quantum is about 2.18 to 2.36 million already. And now when we look at Lake Garden Residences, the size is slightly bigger, 1356 square feet, and this is at 2178 PSF. And the quantum transactor is at 2.75 million all the way to 3.13 million. For Sora, 1005 square feet for the 4 bidders because there hasn't been much transactions. So this one is averaging about 2006 PSF at 3.62 million. To me, right, it's quite shocking that Lakeside 4-bedder, we already hit 3.6 million already, because this is like kind of the prices you kind of expect at D15. You get what I mean? But right now, you're kind of in this new price range already. Lakeside already can accept 3.6 million. And same thing, assuming for Lucerne Grand, 1,002 square feet for harmonized, and at 2,005 PSF. So this one is like a bigger 4-bedder already. The quantum range we are expecting is about 3 million, slightly above 3 million. So if the 4-bedders is slightly smaller, of course the quantum will be lower lah. But you see, right, even at 3 million, it still sits comfortably within Lake Garden Residences and Sora. Of course, the gap to Lake Grande is going to be quite big. This one, right, it will be more the 4-bedder. If you want to compare towards Lake Grande's 4-bedder, right, you need the harmonized layout to be about 10 something lah, or maybe a very low 1001. Then I think you can see a much closer price gap. But if not, right, this 1,002, it should be closer towards like 1,003 square feet onwards layout. When we look at all these numbers for the 4-bedder, right, assuming if CDL really launch a much bigger 4-bedder, then I think the resale value for Lake Grande's 1152 square feet 4-bedder, right, has very significant advantage, because you see the quantum gap on the lower range versus Lucerne Grand's 1,002 square feet, right, it's almost a 900k gap, and on the higher range it's still a 700k gap. I think in the end, when you look at this area, it is still quantum sensitive. So if I were to choose for purely exit, right, Lake Grande's 1152 square feet is still number one for me for exit. But if Lucerne Grand actually comes in with like a 1,000 square feet 4-bedder, you must see what is the PSF and overall quantum. It might change the entire discussion here. So using all the same metrics, here you can see the raw PSF, and then I add the 5% harmonization. Lake Grande, we are looking at about 2001. So this one is about a 14% gap from 2005 PSF. Lake Garden Residences 2002 PSF range is about 8.5% gap, and then Sora, if it's at 2004 PSF, we are looking at almost less than 1% gap. To me, is if you have the 4-bedders at around 2005 PSF, right? If you compare between all the different bedrooms, this is the most value buy already, assuming it's at 2005 PSF, because you can see for Lake Grande, even in the resale market, right, we already hit 2001 PSF post harmonization. It means that the premium for the 4-bedders is a lot more versus the 3-bedders here. To sum it all up, it doesn't mean at 2005 PSF is automatically a good buy. In the end, you still need to analyze which facing and which stack and what is the comparison for each bedroom type before you make a more informed decision. And for my clients that is also already interested in Lucerne Grand, I actually done much deeper dive into what is happening in Lake Grande and Caspian. So for those of you that also are interested in Lucerne Grand after watching this video, you can feel free to WhatsApp me at 8484-9302. I'll be looking forward to hear from you guys. That's it for today's video. I hope you guys got some value so far, and if you like my video so far, you can feel free to leave a like and subscribe. So you can check out my YouTube channel where I've done similar deep dive analysis on the resale and also on the new launch market. Alright, so that's it for today, guys, and cheers. Gonna show you some beautiful sunset views of Lake Gardens.